case with the shooter.
You're listening to a rabbi that today could have been my funeral. What happened on Saturday morning, the unthinkable, the unfathomable, where I faced death face to face. This is not supposed to happen. This isn't Nazi Germany. This isn't a pogrom. This is right here, Poway. This is our home. This building that we built is supposed to be full of love. This building that we built was supposed to be able to share kindness and love with each other. What is happening?
William Lajeunesse is live in Poway, California for us this morning. William?
Well, Sandra, we come to these incidents, to these shootings, and sometimes we know all the answers but one, the why, the motive. Well, in this case, according to police, the alleged gunman, John Ernest, is an anti-Semite and a self-avowed white supremacist. What we did not know were the facts. Where was the gunman? Why did he stop? How was he caught? Well, now we do. I spoke to Oscar Stewart. He's a longtime member of the congregation, 51 years old, a veteran, 8 years in the service. He heard the shots. He saw the burst of gunfire. He yelled. He immediately bolted at the shooter, who was carrying an assault-style rifle with a sling over his shoulder. He was wearing a tack vest with several magazines. According to the sheriff, the gun jammed. But with Stewart closing the gap, the gunman did not have a chance to reload, and he ran into the parking lot.
He shot twice. When I yelled at him, he dropped the weapon and started to run. He looked at me. He looked at me like in awe, dropped his weapon and ran.
There were about 100 members inside the sanctuary. Had the gunman gotten inside, Rabbi Goldstein said it would have been a bloodbath. Instead, 1 dead, 3 injured. Now, Stewart was joined then by off-duty Border Patrol agent Jonathan Morales, who joined him in the parking lot, firing 5 shots, not from his service revolver, but a gun that was set aside for law enforcement members of the synagogue. The rabbi telling him, arm yourself when you are here, you'll never know when we need it. That was following an active shooter drill just months ago. Still, the gunman was able to get off several rounds, and he took the life of a close friend of Rabbi Goldstein, friend Lori Kay. She died in her husband's arms.
Her dear husband, Dr. Howard Kay, who's like a brother to me, is trying to resuscitate her, and he faints. And he's laying there on the floor next to his wife. And then the daughter Hannah comes out screaming, Daddy and Mommy, what's going on? This is the most heart-wrenching sight I could have seen.
The funeral for Lori Kay is today. From top to bottom, Sandra, Stewart told me that the time of the shooting took about 2 minutes, about 16 minutes from the time of the guns fired until he was captured by San Diego police. Ernest will be arraigned tomorrow on 1 count of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. Back to you.
A community trying to heal this morning. William Lajeunesse, thank you.
President Trump addressing that shooting on Saturday while in Wisconsin.
America's heart is with the victims of the horrific synagogue shooting in Poway. Our entire nation mourns the loss of life, prays for the wounded, and stands in solidarity with the Jewish community.
The president called the rabbi who was wounded in that attack, offering his support.
I received a personal phone call from our President Donald Trump. He shared with me condolences on behalf of the United States of America, and he spoke about his love of peace and Judaism and Israel, and he was just so comforting that I'm really grateful to our president for taking the time and making that effort to share with us his comfort and consolation.
President Trump also thanked the off-duty Border Patrol agent who helped chase the shooter away. The New York Times issuing not 1 but 2 apologies over the weekend after running an anti-Semitic political cartoon featuring President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Times first apologizing after the cartoon ran on Thursday, saying the image was offensive and it was an error of judgment to publish it. And going further with a statement on Sunday that reads in part, "We are deeply sorry for the publication of an anti-Semitic political cartoon last Thursday. We are committed to making sure nothing like this happens again. Such imagery is always dangerous, and at a time when anti-Semitism is on the rise worldwide, it is all the more unacceptable." The Times also running an op-ed by Bret Stephens. That headline reads, "A despicable cartoon in the Times. The paper of record needs to reflect deeply on how it came to publish anti-Semitic propaganda."
We're going to have a whole lot more on this coming up on the New York Times story and the rise in attacks targeting places of worship. The CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, will be our guest, and he will join us next hour. Meanwhile, stunning new developments in the aftermath of the Jussie Smollett case. The Chicago Sun-Times reporting Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx has been subpoenaed to appear in court. A retired judge is reportedly pushing for a special prosecutor to investigate her handling of the case. Mike Tobin is live from Chicago. Mike, so why is Kim Foxx being subpoenaed?
Well, Sandra, the petition asking for a special prosecutor says Fox's handling of the Jussie Smollett case was plagued with irregularity. You will remember that Kim Foxx publicly said that she was going to recuse herself from the Jussie Smollett case right around the time he transitioned from being treated as the victim of a hate crime to being charged by police as the suspect in a hoax. The reason she was stepping aside was that she had extensive contact with family and supporters of Smollett when he was still thought to be a victim. Foxx did not recuse the Cook County Prosecutor's Office. Text later revealed that she kept on top of the case and even made recommendations about dropping the charges. As reported by the Chicago Sun-Times, the petition written by retired appellate judge Sheila O'Brien says Fox's conflict in this matter is beyond dispute. And in March, you remember, the charges against Smollett were abruptly dropped. Fox's deputy, Joseph Magatz, has also been subpoenaed to appear before the special prosecutor investigating this matter. Sandra.
Mike Tobin in Chicago on that story for us. Mike, thanks.
Meantime, the Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, is threatening to skip one of two hearings on Capitol Hill this week. The Justice Department saying the House Judiciary Committee is changing some key terms of the hearing. The DOJ says, quote, "The Attorney General agreed to appear before Congress. Therefore, members of Congress should be the ones doing the questioning." He remains happy to engage with members on their questions regarding the Mueller report. On Capitol Hill. Let's bring in David Drucker, senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. David, Democrats are running the House now, and Democrats have decided the Attorney General agreed to appear before Congress, including lawyers, members of Congress, should be the ones of the Attorney General. He remains happy to engage with members on their questions regarding
Yeah, well, look, I'm not surprised. I actually think it's a good move by Democrats to try and get their lawyers and expert staff to question the Attorney General, because you're likely to elicit more information with really sharp, pointed questions by professionals rather than the usual grandstanding and pontificating you'll get in these sorts of hearings from a member of Congress. A lot of them are not going to be legal minds, they're not going to be expert in this. The questions are not going to be as sharp, they're not going to be as knowledgeable. And for all of those reasons, I understand why the Attorney General wouldn't want to submit to these new guidelines, because it's going to look much better for him, and he's going to have the upper hand in these sorts of hearings, more likely a member of Congress. I would say if he's the one controlling how the question and answer session runs, and given his deep experience, he served as Attorney General before this, his legal experience, his understanding of everything, because he'll end up coming off better if he's dealing with a lot of lawmakers that have all sorts of agendas. So I understand where he's coming from. I understand where Democrats are coming from. Ultimately, this is a political question.
But these things are typically nailed down well in advance. Are the Democrats changing the rules
Attorney
here?
General before this?
Well, sure.
But legal so what? I mean, that's what they do, and that's what Republicans do when the shoe is on the other foot. Lawmakers, when they're dealing with an administration in which there's an adversarial relationship and not a partisan affiliation, are often going to try and gain the upper hand by changing the rules, by catching the people that are going to be appearing before them off balance, and to try and gain a political upper hand, and also to try and gain an advantage in terms of getting information. I mean, look, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, one of the most common refrains I hear when I talk to voters is that they think a lot of these committee hearings are circuses, that they're jokes, that nobody's really trying to get information that's relevant, that everybody everybody just has a political point to score. So in some ways, and also changing the rules to have staff asking pointed questions is a way to avoid a lawmaker that doesn't know what he or she is doing. On the other hand, I understand completely where the Attorney General is coming from. That's not what he's looking for, because he is in a much better position politically if he can say, look, these guys aren't interested in information, they're not interested in what's in the Mueller report, they just want to get the president, they're coming after me as a proxy for the president, and so this creates the kind of scenario where he's going to resist being talked to by staff and lawyers, and Democrats are going to push for this. I think ultimately this will be resolved, but they're probably trying to see how far they can get with this.
Yeah, Jerry Nadler, who chairs that committee over the weekend, said this. He says the witness is not going to tell the committee how to conduct its hearing, period.
The kind of scenario where he's going
but if the witness decides not to show up, Nadler is threatening to subpoena him. How would that go?
This will be resolved. Well, I think you'd see the reaction along partisan lines. Republicans would say they're going overboard. Democrats would say they're doing what's necessary in order to get a key member of the administration on this topic before the House. And look, the House Democrats are right in one regard, you might say, and that is it's their committee. It's their majority.
Well, I think you'd
they can run it any way they see fit. It'll be up to voters to decide if they're being unreasonable. I think this is the sort of adversarial and aggressive oversight a lot of voters would probably like to see more often from Congress. And look, with a president, House Democrats usually throw it depends on who's in office. You might say, so if you're a Democrat, this is exactly what you want to see. When the tables are turned, this is what Republicans would like to see, with Republican members of Congress going after a Democratic president. I think this is the sort of
David Drucker, Washington Examiner. David. Thanks.
A lot of voters. Thanks a lot.
Meanwhile, President Trump sounding off on Joe Biden's run for the White House as the former VP hits the campaign trail today, zoning in on some key battlegrounds for 2020. We're going to take all of that up.
Plus, gunfire breaks out in another major city, killing one and injuring several others. David Drucker learning this morning. Examiner.
And President Trump calling out Democrats for digging in their heels and refusing to help solve the border crisis. Former DOJ official Tom Dupree zoning in on some key battlegrounds for
20 million members have connected to a deeper family story. Order your kit at Ancestry.com.
Wants to take down the walls. That means he's finished. I think Biden has been exposed. He's very weak. He doesn't want to talk about this. I don't guess what their plan is. Do they want to let people in that shouldn't be here? Because we have people that are trying to get in that shouldn't be here.
President Trump slamming Joe Biden as the former vice president gets ready to hold his first campaign-style rally in battleground Pennsylvania. Let's bring in Robert Wolf, former economic advisor to President Obama and CEO of 32 Advisors. Good morning to you, Robert.
Great to be here.
Great of you to be here. I know you wanted to disclose that you've already given to Joe Biden's campaign.
I have given to Joe's.
So you gave to others too. Joe Biden as the former vice president gets ready to hold his what is going on here? So Joe Biden's officially in battleground Pennsylvania. He's going to be hitting some of the big battlegrounds. Former economic advisor. What's the message? Can he have widespread appeal? Good morning to you, widespread appeal.
Great to be here. The answer is yes, and a few things that we have that's happened over the last few days that show it. One, I think for a lot of us, we wanted to see how his first day fundraising came in. It came in at $6.3 million. He won, you could say, that 24 hours. Big concern, and he passed that test. Number two, who would come out and endorse the vice president? Today, you got the Firefighters Association. The Firefighters Union came out and backed him. That's a big get for him, because a lot of the union members went for President Trump instead of Hillary Clinton, so that's a great get. And number three, if we look at the midterms, and I know we can have this different debate, but there was truly a blue wave that flipped from red to blue, and that was because 40-plus moderate candidates won. And the number one surrogate for moderate candidates was Joe Biden. He's the one that went into Pennsylvania to Connor Lamb's district. He's the one that could go into all these other places in the coast and in the Rust Belt.
Really interesting to look at the latest polling. This is the Washington Post ABC News poll. 2020 Democratic primary vote choice. Democrats and Dem-leaning independents choose Joe Biden 17% over Bernie Sanders at 11% right now. Still early though.
Yeah, I think what it tells you is we don't have that pure front runner like we've had in the past, where Hillary Clinton was at 65%. What we have right now is a very diverse field. That name recognition at inception means a lot. Scott and Joe and Bernie have the best name recognition. I do think, though, one poll came out. I know President Trump said Joe's weak, but the only poll that came out head-to-head, Vice President 6 points up on President Trump. So I do think that 65%, that's considered weak, then we'll take that.
That's key, obviously, how they compare when it comes to the president. But looking at the primary choice in this polling is really interesting when you look at the generational divide and the choice of younger voters for Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders. There's the 17 versus the 11 for all who were asked the question that we just referenced. But then you divide it by age, 18 to 29 years old. They choose Bernie Sanders 13 to 3 for Biden. Polling is really interesting when you look at the generational. Ages 30 to 49, you still have that difference, and then you get up to that 50 and older category, and the choice is clearly Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think that you cannot discount the incredible populist move that Bernie Sanders has really created in the party. Now, that's not where I am, but there is no question there's a whole movement there. It could be 25-30% of the vote is going into that lane, and it will be today probably divvied up between, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren as we go into the primary season. I think that being said, all of the candidates, Sandra, are checking the boxes off on climate change and health care and immigration and gun reform. And I don't think you need more than that. You have to say that you're for progressive, key issues. But we are going to have a vote on who can beat President Trump, and I think that's going to be, at the end, the most important people vote on.
Very interesting, and you were obviously very, very close and remain very close to the Obamas, and this piece in the New York Times is very telling. The headline, Biden and Obama's odd couple relationship aged into family ties. It looks back at the last potential run by Joe Biden and says 4 years ago, Barack Obama gently discouraged him from running for president. But Joseph R. Biden Jr. is back and presenting himself as Mr. Obama's natural heir. What did you think of that piece? Because it was really interesting that in the wake of his official announcement that he is running, that former President Obama did not come out and officially endorse him.
Yep. So on September 11, 2015, Joe came to New York and met with one person to talk about his candidacy, and that was me. And we spoke on Fox many years ago about it. And at that point, I think Joe's heart was not into running, his head was, and he couldn't get over that. He was still grieving the loss of both. So it was not a surprise that he was not ready to run. Yes, I'm close with the president, and I'm also close with the vice president. I think that the president is not going to tip the scale one way or the other. Most presidents don't do that. Certainly he's going to say very supportive things of the vice president. And trust me, if the vice president is the general election candidate, he will be all in.
I want to get you back because I heard you talk about climate change and I heard you talk about health care, but the economy.
Yeah.
Republicans are going to push Democrats, and a former bank guy yourself, you know that is going to be an important message for your party.
There's no question that the president has a message, but he's not talking about that message. He's talking about, all these other things over his
We've got to leave it there. Robert Wolf,
thanks for having me on
here this morning. Thank you, sir. John?
A stunning new report out this morning saying that Boeing neglected to share with several airlines and the FAA a key piece of information that might have saved hundreds of lives. Plus, the Trump administration making it absolutely clear that they did not pay any money to North Korea for the return of Otto Warmbier. General Jack Keane weighs in.
Cookout ends in gunfire on the west side of Baltimore. At least one person was killed. Police say a total of 7 were shot. Now the search is on for suspects.
What we know right now is that there was a black male who approached the intersection and began firing indiscriminately into the crowd, striking a number of people. What we believe is that there was a second shooter, perhaps firing back, but it is still unknown, perhaps firing back at that perpetrator.
Police are asking the public for any information about what may have prompted that shooting.
A shocking report from the Wall Street Journal quoting officials in the government and the aviation industry saying Boeing did not tell several airlines as well as the Federal Aviation Administration that new plane models lacked a warning system that alerts pilots to malfunctioning sensors. Doug McElway is live in Washington with more on that. Doug.
Good morning, John. The Wall Street Journal cites FAA and industry officials that pilots and airlines did not know for more than a year after the MAX 8 was introduced in 2017 that Boeing had deactivated a cockpit light that warned of an angle of attack disagree alert. As has been reported frequently, Boeing made that warning light an added cost feature in the MAX 8, a decision now rescinded in the aftermath of the crashes. The two recent crashes of MAX 8 planes have been linked to faulty angle of attack vanes. In fact, in the recent Ethiopian crash, black box data shows the angle of attack sensor on the left side of the plane just outside the pilot's window was broken off either by a bird strike or debris. That would have triggered an immediate warning light had one been installed in the plane. According to internal FAA emails obtained by the Journal, one FAA official wrote 6 weeks after the October crash of the Lion airplane, quote, "It would be irresponsible to have MAX aircraft operating with angle of attack disagree warning system inoperative." That said, the Journal story is mostly old news. Additionally, I'm told by former NTSB board member John Golia that the existence of such a warning light would have been helpful at high cruise altitude when the plane is on autopilot and the pilots are not fully scanning the instrument panel. Golia adds, but on takeoff, when one of the pilots is dedicated to actively monitoring all of the instruments, the warning light would not add an additional substantial improvement because they're already monitoring all the instruments. As all MAX planes remain grounded worldwide, Boeing and the FAA are finalizing a new MCAS software tweak. That's the automated pitch control system that was designed to pitch the plane's nose down to compensate for the MAX plane's tendency to pitch up under full power because of its more powerful engines. And amidst many investigations, Boeing test pilots have made 146 test flights of the MAX with the updated software. That's the latest, John. Back to you.
Doug McElway. Doug, thanks.
President Trump, meanwhile, accusing Democrats of putting politics over the security of our borders.
They're allowed to stay in our country, catch and release. They're allowed, you catch them, and then you have to release them. It is crazy. Congress has to fix these horrible immigration laws.
He says the immigration system is broken and that the courts are overloaded with up to 900,000 cases. Former DOJ official Tom Dupree will be here to take us through it next.
Plus, accusations of an anti-vaccination propaganda campaign as the measles outbreak continues to get worse.
Well, I know that they have been on calls with other members of their community with non-scientific information that has been provided, propaganda of sorts.
It's a disgrace to our country, what's going on. The worst immigration laws ever. The problem is you have 10 times more people coming up with their families. It's like Disneyland now. You know, before you'd get separated, so people would say, let's not go up. Now you don't get separated, so it turned out to be a disincentive that is obviously a disaster.
The president sounding off on what he calls a broken immigration system, slamming the courts for a massive backlog of immigration cases due to the surge of migrants at our southern border. Let's bring in now former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Tom Dupree. Tom, good morning to you. I want to pull up those numbers right away. The president certainly is targeting and criticizing the immigration courts for the backlog. This is the apprehensions at the border, if we want to start there first. You look at what is happening now. 53,000, more than that in the month of March. Compare that to just January, and then of course look back a year ago at those numbers, and you are seeing a surge of family unit apprehensions at the border. Here's the immigration court backlog that the president was referencing there. Nearly 900,000 cases backlogged in the courts. That's at the end of March this year, Tom. That's a problem.
It is absolutely a problem, Sandra. Frankly, it is stunning to me that we are seeing these numbers and that there still does not seem to be a consensus in Congress on how to fix this system. This is intolerable, what we have here right now. The border is in a state of chaos and disorder. I think there are people in Washington who are focused on a solution, who are saying that this can't continue. We have to do something to manage this system. But it's very frustrating. In those numbers, the problem is not going away.
We address the apprehensions of family units at the border as well, because the president is certainly using this in his argument and his description as to why this is a crisis at our border.
Well, for sure, because look, the fact is when you have people showing up with children in tow, for one thing, it means that they have already endured what in all likelihood has been a very, very dangerous trip from wherever they began to the United States border. And so we as the United States don't want to be in the situation of creating incentives for people to put children in jeopardy. Then when they arrive here, they have that very difficult decision. That is, the Border Patrol has that very difficult decision as to whether you keep families together, whether you separate them. As we know, the administration tried a policy of separation. That's been put aside, and so now they're keeping family units together. But there's no question that that would create an incentive, if you know that there's no separation, to travel as a family, which of course puts these children in danger.
What can Congress do right now? The president made the case several times in that interview that the laws need to be fixed. Congress needs to act. He was very critical of Congress for not acting. And what are the next steps? Because there is certainly criticism of the Trump administration as well for not putting out specific policy proposals to fix the problem.
Absolutely. Well, I think first it starts with increasing resources. Right now, you alluded earlier to the fact that the immigration courts are overwhelmed. There is a massive years-long backlog in deciding these cases. The problem is that many times you have people who come to the United States and they remain in the United States while their cases are being adjudicated. We are not processing these things quickly. There's not fair and efficient justice. So I think at a minimum, you need to make sure that we have resources in the legal system to ensure that everyone who comes here is treated fairly under the laws of the United States. I think you also have to put money into border security. If you don't have a secure border, there's not really much point to the whole enterprise if people are disrespecting our border.
I want to ask you about what's happening this week. Bring it back home here with Attorney General William Barr. He's set to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday. Thursday is House Judiciary, and it really is setting up to be quite a battle with House Democrats and William Barr, with him not liking the fact that they want counsel to be able to ask, committee counsel to be able to ask questions of William Barr, not just members of Congress. What kind of fight are we about to see happen here?
Well, I think we are going to see a real battle here because you put your finger on it. The issue right now is whether the staff attorneys on the House committee will be allowed to question the Attorney General or whether the questioning will be conducted only by the congresspersons themselves. It's somewhat ironic in that I think the House Democrats are essentially acknowledging that they are not capable of going toe-to-toe with the Attorney General and asking him questions. So they want to bring in their professional staff members to do the questioning. I think it's reasonable that the Attorney General is pushing back. He's saying, look, I'm here to testify before Congress, not before the members of the congressional staffs. My suspicion is that they may try to reach some sort of accommodation, either to say, fine, the questioning will be carried out only by the congressman. Maybe you allow for a very, very limited window to be questioned by the staff. But at the end of the day, I think there are strong incentives on both sides to try to work this out rather than have this battle get funneled into the courts.
Ken Starr was on Fox earlier today saying this is what Congress is there to do, represent the people and ask the important questions and not have staff there to do that. Tom Dupree, great to have you this morning. Thank you for coming on America's Newsroom.
Thank you, Sandra.
All right.
Well, some public health experts battling the nationwide measles outbreak, claiming that anti-vaccine propaganda is making the epidemic even worse. Brian Yennis is live from one of the hardest hit communities in the northern suburbs of New York City. Brian.
John, Rockland County is experiencing the longest ongoing measles outbreak in the country. And health officials here and the CDC are largely blaming now anti-vaccination propaganda targeted to the ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jewish communities here that is convincing some mothers that vaccines are dangerous for their kids. Take a look at this. Posters like this are spreading, calling vaccines dangerous while showing a needle attached to a gun. An organization called Peach is distributing this anti-vax booklet. It calls that the Vaccination Safety Handbook. It's littered with false information to convince parents that vaccinations are more harmful than disease. This illustration claims vaccines are dangerous because they're filled with aborted fetuses, pig and monkey cells. The organization also makes robocalls and has a hotline for parents to listen to anti-vax propaganda. The organization even compares vaccinations to Nazi experiments during the Holocaust. Quote, the Nazis argued that their experiments were for the greater good of society. Our right to refuse medical treatment is denied in the name of public health. Precisely the logic used by the Nazis. Here is Rockland County's health commissioner talking about all this.
It's very frustrating because it's misinformation. It's misguiding people in the community. And the concern with this group is that they are affecting a population where a lot of what is decided by moms is by word of mouth.
Rabbis are urging parents to vaccinate, noting there is nothing in the Jewish religion that prevents it. Unvaccinated children are now banned from school in Rockland County, and in Brooklyn there's a mandatory vaccination order. Also, more than a dozen Orthodox Jewish nurses and physicians have formed what's called the Vaccination Task Force, and they're distributing a booklet of their own called PI that debunks all of this anti-vaccination propaganda. They're also entering homes, John, and holding private meetings with mothers to try to tell them that vaccinations are vital and important. The CDC is releasing the latest measles numbers at 11 a.m. this morning. John?
All right, Brian Yennis from Rockland County in New York. Thank you.
All right, well, sometimes you go to a baseball game, John, and a ball comes your way and you realize you forgot your glove. One Mets fan trying to catch a long fly ball. Wait for it. With his beer cup, the Brewers outfielder Ryan Braun going back to make the play. He gets showered with beer. Clearly an accident by all there. Both teams' social media pages having some fun. Milwaukee saying, we know we're the Brewers, but that doesn't mean we want to bathe in beer, you guys. While the Mets account saying, cheers, Brewers. Well, all right, well,
I think the Mets won. I think the Mets won that game, but the Brewers got the series. So I guess they're going home happy.
And somebody lost their beer, and the baseball player gained some. All right.
Only $8 worth of beer. Thanks. National Security Advisor John Bolton firing back on several claims why he denies the U.S. paid any money for the release of Otto Warmbier, as the Iranian foreign minister accuses him of trying to purposefully create conflict. General Jack Keane is here with his thoughts next.
Plus, President Trump throwing a lot of jabs at Joe Biden as the former vice president hits the ground running in several battleground states this week. Our headliner, Sean Spicer, is here to react.
Can you imagine Sleepy Joe, Crazy Bernie? You look at the candidates, right? I think Pocahontas, she's finished, she's out.
A crane collapse, killing 4 people in downtown Seattle. The crane was being dismantled when it fell, breaking in half and crashing onto the street below. 2 of the dead were crane operators. 2 were drivers down on the street level. No word yet on the cause. Washington State's Department of Labor and Industries is now investigating 4 companies in connection with that incident.
I guess the bottom line question is, did the U.S. pay any money to North Korea, however it was disguised, after Warmbier was released?
Absolutely not. And I think that's the key point.
National Security Advisor John Bolton there saying the U.S. did not pay North Korea in any way for the release of Otto Warmbier, despite a U.S. official signing a pledge to do so. Let's bring in Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired 4-star General Jack Keane. General Keane, the North Koreans are claiming that they are owed, that they got the $2 million for Warmbier's release. The National Security Advisor says it didn't happen. Which side do you believe?
Well, I'll take that at face value. Ambassador Bolton speaking for the United States government, we didn't pay it. And that would be consistent, John, with the 22 other hostages / detainees that the administration is able to get released from captivity. We've never paid any money for any of that, and it certainly had a remarkable success for just over 2 years in the administration. I really think this is pretty despicable on the part of the North Koreans. I mean, obviously the treatment of Otto directly contributed to his death, and prior to that his hospitalization, and then to turn around and ask us to foot the hospital bill, it just underscores how outrageous this regime really is. And I think releasing this information now, John, has much to do with the failure of the Hanoi summit for Kim Jong-un, because he came home empty-handed, without the sanction relief that everyone in his country at least believed he was going to get. Since then, he's fired as chief negotiator, and I think he's been trying to leverage the administration here in terms of getting back to some kind of negotiation, as well as trying to convince his people in his country that he's still moving forward and there's momentum on his side.
The doctor who went to North Korea to pick up Otto and bring him home did sign a pledge to pay the money. One assumes that that was just kind of thrust on him at the last minute. And, you know, he felt that he had to sign something, sign anything, just to get the poor guy home.
Yeah, I would imagine that's the case. I also suspect he probably did that in coordination with government officials. I suspect he had some kind of communication with our government, and they authorized him to do that, to get Otto out of there, knowing full well they never intended to honor that commitment, because we never do pay money to get our detainees, hostages out. And it's just shameful, that whole incident, in terms of what the North Koreans did here.
I want to turn to Iran and what the Iranian foreign minister said to Chris Wallace regarding the Trump administration and its relationship with the Iranian government. Listen.
So you think it's Israel, Bolton,
Saudi Arabia, Salman's, and United Arab Emirates,
all trying to exercise regime change?
At least they want. They have all shown an interest in dragging the United States into a conflict. I do not believe that President Trump wants to do that.
He doesn't believe President Trump wants a conflict. It sounds like a little bit of fear on the part of the Iranians. Am I misreading that, General?
No, the Iranians really are under pressure that they have never been under since they took power in the early 1980s. You know, through their proxies, they've been killing us steadily. They blew up our embassy in Lebanon, our Marine barracks in Lebanon, the annex in Lebanon, the U.S. embassy in Kuwait, our Air Force barracks in Saudi Arabia. They killed us in Iraq for 4 years with advanced IEDs. They've been about trying to drive us out of the Middle East. And to be frank about it, and I've been disappointed through the years, almost 40 years, that no one has ever put the pressure on the Iranian regime and held them accountable for that behavior. This administration is doing just that. And they feel the pressure. And the administration is also trying to stitch together a Middle East strategic alliance to stand up and counter Iran. And they've had some challenges putting that together because of disagreements among those nations. But nonetheless, the pressure on Iran is the most that they have ever had to deal with.
Obviously, more pressure than they felt in the previous administration. General Keane, we have to say goodbye. We appreciate your thoughts this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Good talking to you, John.
You too.
Well, the rabbi of a California synagogue recounting his face-to-face with a gunman.
Here is a young man standing with a rifle, pointing right at me. And I look at him. He had sunglasses on. I couldn't see his eyes. I couldn't see his soul. I froze.
The shooting that left one woman dead, just the latest attack on a place of worship. So what can be done to combat this disturbing trend?
Plus, one state threatening to take President Trump's name off the 2020 ballot unless he releases his tax returns. We'll tell you about those plans next.